Good morning, everyone. This is Julia, and I wanted to share with you today about what happened in 1992 through 2003, in that time, uh, in starting our Christian bookstore. It was called Faith Bookstore. And how it began was I was watching a TV program on TBN with John Avanzini. And John Avanzini made the statement that in order for God to bless you and prosper you, He had given you something that you had your whole life that you could use to become wealthy. And so I began to think about that and pray about it and spent a day and a few days praying about it. And I knew down on the inside of me, the thing that I had was this love for books. I already had taken some Bible college at that time and was a studier. Even though in high school and grade school I never did study until I got the revelation of knowledge and what the wonderful things that were in books. And so I had my large collection of books already and I taught others how to use the Strongs, how to use the Vines, how to use different things, to study the Word. And so my love for the Word of God and my love for Bibles and all the teachings of the Lord, that was what I need to capitalize on. So I prayed about it, and then I began to go to the library in Brownsville, Texas, and the little librarian there told me to go to their university that was in Brownsville. They had a college there. So I went to the college library, and it was like stepping into the most beautiful place. It was quiet, and they had walls of books. And I asked her to show me to the books that would help me to start a business so I could learn how to start a Christian bookstore. That's what I was going to do. So for 1 year, I was able to go to that library, check out books on how to start a business, and then I'd get up every single day at 8 o'clock in the morning, or I'd get up before that and get my husband off to work and sit down at the table with these books spread out all over the table with notepads, graphs, all the things that I needed, and begin to study and work on my plan to start a Christian bookstore. And so I studied, I learned how to start a business, how to have it operate to where it paid for itself, and how to break even. Learned about breaking even, learned how to market my business. I learned everything that you could know. And there was a great book called How to Start a Business on a Shoestring. Wonderful book. So after a year, I was ready. I knew it. The timing was right. And in the Bible, let me get this verse out. I want to show it to you. 1 Chronicles 12:32. It said, "And of Issachar men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do." It was time for me to start a Christian bookstore in Brownsville, Texas. So I began to look to take actions. Now, there was a Kmart in Brownsville that was getting ready to close down, and they had baskets of little silk flowers for just pennies. And so I collected a whole basket full of them. I mean, a cart of them. Took them and began to make a lei, a long string of flowers to hang over the door. And that lei hung over my bookstore for 10 years, for 9 years. It hung over the bookstore. Very beautiful. And another thing that happened was the library that I went to closed down after 1 year. Public was no longer allowed to go into the college library and use their books. And then the next thing that happened was I began to visit a church in Harlingen, Texas called Faith Pleases God with Carlos Ortiz. And so I was there and I met this beautiful little couple from Canada. And being a sanguine person, I talk to anybody. There is no stranger to me. I'll tell anybody anything. And it's really hard to, the Lord's always having to say, don't say that. So that's my personality, is the sanguine personality. So I met this little couple and began to tell them about I was going to start a Christian bookstore, and they said, "Oh, we used to own one. We owned a Christian bookstore in Canada." And so they began to tell me how to start it, worked with me, and began to show me all the things. And there was another couple there that were from Canada, and she invited us all over to her beautiful house, large, with lots of acres and a beautiful dog and just so pretty. And so when we began to talk about the bookstore, she said, "I have a friend. She wrote a book called Christian Mother Goose, and she lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Her name was Marjorie Decker, Marjorie Ainsborough Decker." And she wrote the most beautiful book, and it's very popular. You can still get it on Amazon today, called Christian Mother Goose. It's so good. And so she gave me Marjorie, some information about Marjorie, and I gave her my phone number. And Marjorie called me from Tulsa, Oklahoma. She had a little bookstore that she was getting ready to close. She was getting older and wanted to retire. And so she called me up on the phone, talked to me for 2 hours, telling me everything that I needed to do, and then sent me a box full of trade magazines that would teach you everything you needed to know about bookstores. One of them was from the Charisma magazine. It was called Christian Retailing by Paul Strang. And I studied every one of those books. I pulled them out and I wrote down all the vendors and began to contact them and tell them, "Hey, I'm getting ready to start a Christian bookstore." I couldn't do anything until I had the building. They could not do anything for me. But I was already marketing, talking to him, becoming friends with him, and setting up my contacts. And I got accounts with all of them eventually. But then what happened was, while I was at Faith Pleases God, someone dropped a large business card in the ladies' restroom, and I picked it up. And it was called Faith Alive Bookstore. And it was in McAllen, Texas, by this real sweet couple there. They owned a furniture store and the bookstore. And so I called her up. I said, "Hey, would you like to have coffee? I'd like to talk to you about your bookstore and get some training and experience from you. Hear what you're doing." So we met. She was a darling. She said, "Julia, you just need to go out there and find that building and put 3 or 4 books on the shelf and sell them, because you got to take a step. You got to step in the water. You got to start." And so I did just that. I got in the car the next day and drove around my town. And I said, "Lord, I'm not getting out of this car till you show me where to put that bookstore." And so I found this little store. It wasn't what I had seen. Now, another thing I forgot to tell you was that there was a time that year that God showed me the bookstore. It had columns in the front, and it was like I had a big front porch. And so, I went to this little building. It didn't even look like that, but I just was desperate. So I just called this man up and said, "I see you have a little building for rent. Could you come tell me about it?" So he picked me up. We went over there, and he said, "I have something else I want to show you." And he took me over to his grandfather's old hardware building. And it was exactly what I saw in the vision. Older building, had front porch, had the columns in front. And the building was 5,000 square feet. He said, "I'll rent you the first 1,000. And you don't even have to pay me this month. You can pay me next month after you make some money." So now, there's one other thing I have to tell you. I calculated, and I knew exactly how much I needed to make and I needed to bring in to start this store. Usually they would tell you 100,000, but I asked the Lord for 50,000. That's where my faith was. So one day I sat in a chair and I said, "Father, I just thank you that I have $50,000 to start this store, because you called me to do it. I know it's your will, and you will provide it." And so I began to sit there and I said, "I thank you for $50,000. I thank you for $50,000, Lord. I thank you for $50,000 to pay for this store. And I did that for about an hour. And you know what happened? All of a sudden, I saw it. I saw this vision. Out of my mouth, I saw like a funnel that looked like fog. And in that fog were there these words. And I had the narrow end of the funnel here, and it widened out, spread it out. And the words were going out of my mouth, out into the air. And God showed me that my words were doing the work, that they were going to bring in the money. Now, how's that money going to come in? Well, somehow I got 4 or 5 credit cards with $10,000 on each of them. That was my credit back then. I didn't even know what credit was, but that's where my credit was. And so I had $50,000 on credit cards. Plus, these companies gave me 30-day accounts. And so I was able to order the prettiest displays and set it up in that bookstore. And there was one company called Warner and another one called C.R. Gibsonton. Now, the back of the store was open, so it was open all the way back, but he was renting me the first 1,000. But Warner had these displays that if you ordered from them, they had the back to them. And so I ordered them and lined them all up, and it made the back wall of my store. And they were the most beautiful things. They had scented candles. All their stationery had scriptures on them. They were in packets, colored, flowered ink pens. The most beautiful things you ever saw. But that's not really what I wanted. I mean, that was good. That was the gifts. But I wanted Bibles and books that taught about the Lord and books on faith. So I ordered the whole list of Kenneth Hagin books, Kenneth Copeland books, and Bibles, and all these other books from Thomas Nelson, and music from Word Music, and all these other companies. And so here I was in my little 1,000 square feet, and T-shirts from Solid Light and other companies, and started. And we opened up the week after, or a few days after Thanksgiving. And right across the street from us was a beautiful restaurant that a lot of people came to. And they'd park in my lot. I would get so mad at them because I only had like 3 spaces in front of my building. And I had to get over that. And they would come and park in front of my building, and people would have to walk to my store. But this store was so blessed by God. We had our pastor at that time come into the store, and he prayed for it, and I handed him a fresh new Bible, a Hebrew Greek keyword study Bible, so that he could study the Word in depth. And 1 block away from us was H-E-B, the grocery store in Brownsville, Texas. So that's where we started. It was just Faith Bookstore at that time. Later, God blessed us with a building, a 2,100 square foot building that had a Noah's Ark built in the back for the children's corner. They had to go up the ramp like they're going into an ark, and that's where all the children's books were. It was painted with animals, and very cute. And I had my own little office in there, and we ended up having 11 employees for the 9 years that it was in business. And then, of course, the timing of it was just only for a decade, and then it stopped. Because folks began to stop buying their music in Christian bookstores. They began to go to Sam's Club for their Bibles, and CDC came out, and online, and then children began to download their music. So me and about 500 other bookstores went out the year that we went out in 2003. But this was a decade that God used our store, and I want to tell you so many things about it. There were people that came up through Mexico and come into our store and weep. We started out with just one little shelf of Spanish products in a town of 95% Spanish-speaking people. Hello. So we began to add Spanish products and get Spanish companies. And in Miami every year there was a big get together with all the Christian bookstores all over the nation would come there, and companies from all over the world would come in and bring their Spanish products. Even Switzerland carried Spanish products, and they bring them up there, and we would order them for the year and order all the Spanish music that people love. Marcus Witt was one of them, and all these different ones. And I hired bilingual. All my employees were bilingual, so we had two listing stations where kids would come in and put the headphones on and listen to the music before they bought it. And I had parents come in and listen with the kids because the Christian rock was really almost abrasive back then. It was great. The words were great, but it was just really challenging for a parent to listen to hear that kind of music and hear the words of it. Um, and then there were conventions that met every year, twice a year. The big one in July and then one in January, and they'd meet at different places around America. And all of us bookstore owners would go over there with suitcases and that's when suitcases begin to get wheels and have handles, and you could pull them around. So we'd go to each booth where these companies would be selling their stuff. You would sign up for what you wanted to order and fill up your store with their things. And then they had stations all around where the bookstore owners would walk from station to station, and some author was signing a book and going to give it to you free. So that we would take our suitcases and just fill them up with free books. And I did that year after year until one year the Lord said, "Why are you picking up all this trash? I will tell you what to pick up." Because I was loading every Tom, Dick, and Harry author in there just because it was free. Christian, supposedly fiction that would scare the tar out of you. I mean, fill people with fear and violence. And I did it because it was free. And that was the craziness of it all. We had people that would walk into our store that were sitting at the restaurant to see what we were about, and they would get healed on the spot. The presence of God was in there. Now, also, I prayed every single morning before we started this store. In the morning, before we opened up, prayed 1 hour in the Holy Spirit, playing music for an hour and just praying, walking back and praying. And I did this every single day for the 9 years that I operated that store. And that's why the presence of God was in there. Worship, I would walk through there, worship, laying my hands on all the products, praying for God to send in people. We had a goal when we started of $500 a day. And the first day we sold $5. But before the year was out, we were doing the $13,000 a month, except for Christmas when we did $25,000 and up to $50,000 during Christmas. Little tiny store. And after a year we built a store, and I covered it in flowers. Go figure. That's part of me. I'm a flower child. I was born in the 50s and flower child in the 60s. So I covered the whole place. There was a Thomas Kincaid book that showed these places with all these flowers, and I just took it and copied them. I put those same exact flowers in front of my store, and folks would just come in to see what they were about. And during that time, he was then Bush. George Bush was governor of Texas, and he got elected to be president. And when he did, I boxed up for him and his wife, Laura, Bibles. I gave him a Hebrew Greek keyword study Bible, and Laura a beautiful pink woman's Bible. Boxed them up and sent them to him and said, "Congratulations." The very next day after they got that, a state senator, walked into my store and walked through it and announced, "I am a senator." I said, "Well, good, glad to know you." And I probably did not give him the respect that he was due. I didn't bow down to him. I just said, okay, great. I hope you enjoy my store, And so we had all kinds of things like that happen. We broke out into the Precious Moments and Yardro figurines and things like that. We got from a big gift show in Dallas that we would go to every year. And we did all those things. But 2003, it all started shutting down. So it was a wonderful decade of serving my community. And another thing I really learned during that time was how to market. And so I went to every pastor in the city and told him we were there and said, hey, I'm here to serve you. Tell me what you need. And then I went to every business around me and said, let's start a neighborhood like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And I said, I'm going to start a birthday club and I'll give every child from something like 4 to 12 years old or 11 years old a little gift bag on their birthday. They sign up for the birthday club. And these companies like Burger King and an ice cream store and a hair cutting place, they all gave me coupons. And we put them in the bag. I had all different companies. And the child would pick up the bag, and I'd have some little token gift in it, and then they get to go to an ice cream store and get a free ice cream because their family going to get it too. So they brought business to that ice cream store. And the haircut place, the little child got one free haircut for his birthday. And so the family developed a relationship with that company. Oh, they loved us. Oh, they loved our store. And for the little cheerleaders that would come in and say, can you buy an ad? Yes, 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 I'll buy your ads. And then the Christmas tree, back in those days, you could buy a Christmas tree from the sports team at one of the schools. Yes, we put their Christmas tree in our store. And on Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, we set up hot apple cider at the front door. Smelled up the whole store and offered hot apple cider and cookies. And the store got so busy that my employees had to have walkie-talkies from across the aisles to help. Where is this found? Where is this found? And I studied the temperaments, so I put the little phlegmatic girls on dusting and cleaning the shelves and making sure every book was in its proper place. I put the melancholies, even though they weren't really good at greeting customers, up front because they were better with the cash register. And I put the greeters, who were the sanguines, at the front door and greeting every single person. And I told every single one of them, my employees, do not ever ask a person, how can I help you? Never, never, never say that. When the person comes in the door, you compliment them and tell them and show them the love of God, how lovely they are. Look at that little baby's dress. Look at the shoes. And I used to play a game with them and say, I know exactly what you're looking for. And I'd name something crazy off the wall, and then they'd tell me exactly what they're looking for. And then I'd go over and take them to it and walk away because I let them have time to look. And we did things like that. I never stopped learning the whole 10 years. I studied all the time, studying how can I be better? How can I do this right? What can I do? And God was wonderful, 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 blessed times. I don't know if I can tell you everything, but if you will meet me at church at New Life Christian Fellowship, come in there. I'll be glad to sit down with you sometime and tell you more of the miracles, the wonders that God did there. Let me just tell you this one last one. There was this man that walked in crying. His wife had left him. And I took him over to some marriage books, and I just bowed my head and prayed with him. Now let me tell you what happened. This man went back, reconciled with his wife. They got back together, and he was so thrilled that he sent me a dozen roses. You have saved my life. This is the kind of thing that I love. This was a great, great time. A great bookstore. And there was a man also that came over from Monterrey, Mexico. And he would have a car full of beautiful things that his little factory in Monterey had made. Christian, I bought every one of them, put them on the shelf, and in a week's time they were all gone. Because the Spanish people, this was their thing. I ended up, started out with one shelf of Spanish products. When we closed, we had half the store was Spanish and half was English. And the Spanish had uh, pinatas hanging from the ceiling and the lights. We had concerts right on their front porch of our store where Spanish people would come up. That's all today. God bless you, and thank you for listening.